nice to be here, and I'd like to thank the conference committee for the invitation. I think my immediate reaction was, well, why does anyone want to hear from me? Which is such a woman thing to do. But having spoken to Rika a couple of years ago, I've been at Warwick for just coming up to 2 years, and I know that the majority of the PRISM network are women, and you can see that in the room. A couple of years ago, I finished my part-time doctorate looking at not what barriers women face in university careers, but what the perceptions are around the interventions that universities have put into place to help women progress into higher education. But what I didn't want to do this morning was start off the conference by saying these were my research objectives and this was my sample and this was my... So how I want to frame it is around asking you all, as you start to think about your career pathways as a main kind of theme throughout the conference, as a mosaic. So for the next 10 minutes, well, actually throughout the day, I'd like you to think about your career as a mosaic picture. Think about what are the big pieces that make up your mosaic. So what are the most impactful parts of your career? And which ones are a bit more or less visible? So maybe they've helped to shape your career in some way that have been undervalued. What are the broken pieces? So these might be things like experience disruption in your career, which is very, very common with PRISM roles. So being at risk of redundancy when you come to the end of that funded project. It may be times where you've experienced personal loss, and there's been times in your career where you've had to be resilient and courageous. Which pieces of your mosaic are bright and bold, and which ones are more faded? So when we're thinking about bright and bold pieces, they're the times in your career where you felt really confident in your own skin. And which ones are a bit more faded? So where have you been undervalued, or those pieces that have not shone so much? What are the gaps between your mosaic? So particularly for women, but for men also, this will be transitions in your career, such as becoming a caregiver, a parent, and having to navigate those mutual identities, both at home and in the workplace. What are the missing pieces? So are there pieces that you wish you could add to your mosaic, and maybe you've tried to explore those opportunities but have faced some barriers? Or maybe you've just not thought about what might come next? And importantly, and this is the question that really kind of framed my own research, was around what material holds the pieces together? Because without the material, the mosaic will fall apart. So with that regard, it's thinking about, particularly instances where you've had personal support, where you may have had mentorship or coaching. You may have had support from management, or what policies or processes have helped or hindered your career pathways. So this is my messy career. And there was a point in time where I felt like I was a bit of jack of all trades, master of none. I've always been a bit of an opportunist. And actually, eventually, I found out that that was okay. But I tried to make this into a mosaic, but my materials was not that great, so bear with me. So just out of interest, how many people in the room when they were younger thought, yes, I want a career in a university? So there are a couple of people, that's great. We need to hear from you later. But I didn't. My mum actually managed the graduation events at Coventry University for a number of years, and I didn't go to university after I left school. I went straight into an apprenticeship, and I kind of followed my mum into an admin role in a university and thought, well, I did my RSA typing exam, as most girls were required to do when I left school. And my first kind of experience was in higher education. So I'm not going to kind of bore you with every detail of my career journey, but what I did want to do was kind of point out those pivotal moments that, particularly those mosaics that were big, bright and bold, and which ones were the cracked and broken pieces. I think for me, my big and bright, bold pieces were around being encouraged to explore a university education. So I was first to get a degree, but I did it all part-time while I worked. And they were surrounded by a number of cracked pieces. So that kind of feeling of not being worthy, not feeling confident, and perhaps being surrounded by people who were more used to that kind of university education environment. There were also times that were kind of quite unexpected. So the gaps between my career, so I have 2 grown-up children now. But after I'd finished kind of being in I'd done a bit of HR, I'd done a bit of kind of admin, a little bit of marketing. So you can see I've got no idea what I want to actually do. Probably still don't around here, but my first pregnancy, I'd actually just been offered a job that I was really, really excited about. And those of you that have been in higher education for a long time might remember the Centre for Excellence in Teaching and Learning. And it was kind of my first management experience. But after I'd accepted the role, and 3 weeks before I was due to start, I found out that I was expecting. So I had to tell my boss, actually, I can only be here for 6 to 9 months before I need to have some maternity leave. So again, surrounded by some of those broken tiles of feeling, actually, I've really got to prove myself before I leave, and I'm going to need to come back quickly, otherwise I'm going to lose out. And then after 5 years, I was redeployed into project and programme management. These particular points where you can see somebody walking on a tightrope are times where I've been at risk of redundancy, and I've either had to apply for a new role or I've been redeployed into other areas. Again, massively influences your confidence. And then my kind of what I said about kind of really feeling confident in your own skin. As I started to do my masters, I decided that actually, again, opportunistically, I was on a course with somebody who said, have you ever thought about doing a bit of teaching? Do it in the evenings as an hourly paid lecturer. And I said, oh yeah, all right then, I'll give it a go. And I went into about an 8 or 9 year career of doing some part-time teaching for about 12 months. And then thought, yes, this is what I really want to do. So I managed to get a job actually teaching project management, did my masters, did my PG cert, and I loved my job, absolutely loved it. I loved the people I worked with. I felt I was on a real good career progression and thought this will be me now. The only thing that was missing is a PhD, which obviously a lot of my peers that were academics did have. So I started my PhD, and then came the big, huge crack in my career. So at 35, I was diagnosed with an acute leukemia, and I was taken out of the workplace for around 18 months, and I ended up having a stem cell transplant. So obviously had to withdraw from the PhD. And as I kind of came out the other end, started to get a little bit better, I was advised by my medical team that I'd gone into early menopause, which explained why my confidence was at rock bottom, but also that I was going to be immunocompromised for quite some time. And working with hundreds of students day in and day out was not really a good idea. So he kind of put this thing in my head that you really need to think about what you're going to be doing over the next few years. So I went back into professional services again. And that was quite hard, actually. It felt like a real loss in my kind of professional career. But eventually I ended up having some coaching. So when I talk about that material that holds it together, I'd had experiences of mentoring and coaching in the past, but this was particularly pivotal for me. It was in lockdown. And I just kind of looked at my CV and thought, what am I going to do next? Because I look like I have absolutely no idea on paper what I want to do. And somebody's going to look at my CV. I've been working in the same institution for about 20 years. And I thought, this is just crazy. But what she helped me to realise was not where I want to be in 5 years' time. I've always struggled with that. And actually, I'm really comfortable being an opportunist now. But what she helped me to realise was, but by having all of these experiences, I've developed a skill set that was really, really transferable. And actually, I could see how higher education worked from different angles. So it completely kind of put it on its head for me. Slowly started to build my confidence back up and went on to the Aurora Women in Leadership programme. There are about 15 of us, and when we finished, we said, what now? So the university had invested, I don't know what it was, £15,000 in us. So where do we go now? All of the academics that were on that programme progressed. All of the professional services staff that were on that programme couldn't access any career development opportunity. And over a third of the cohort ended up leaving, including myself. So this kind of spun the kind of question for me in terms of what is it that holds all of these pieces in my career path together? Because I feel like I'm really trying, but I'm missing out on those opportunities. So this kick-started my doctorate. So what do we know? We know that diverse teams are a positive thing. There's been hordes of research on this. We know it makes workplaces better. We know there's more productivity. In higher education, we know that senior managers that are men are more common. We know that there has been some progress made, but at the rate of the pace of change, it will take another 20 years to gain parity. And I don't know about anybody else in the room, but I would be hoping to kind of be reaching retirement by then. So it'd be nice to see some faster progress being made. Data gets much worse when considering intersectional identities. That is something that we know. And when I started to look at what my research question would be, I knew that barriers were well researched. So we know what the problems are. We know that there's recruitment bias. We know that there are issues with stereotypes. We know there are issues in policies and promotions criteria. We know that there are issues in terms of career breaks. We also know there are issues in terms of women being given more pastoral work or what would be deemed to be women's work in the workplace that take us away from doing those more exciting things. What we didn't know though, what the other thing that we knew was that universities have implemented all of these things to try and make things better. So we have Athena Swan, we have women's only networks, we have women's leadership programs. But what we don't know is what impact they're having. So when I started to look at the research, the other thing that was quite interesting is that all of the research that had been done around barriers were by, with, and about academic women. Professional services women were not really in a lot of research samples, and men weren't either. And for me, I kind of thought, well, actually, if men have actually had advantage from policies and processes, we need to actually ask them their opinions as well. So without going through, I could talk about this for the next 2 hours, but I won't. But what I wanted to share was the kind of key headlines that came out of this. So I used the institution that I was working at the time as a case study, and I had 173 surveys from women who were aspiring leaders within the institution. But I also did 12 in-depth interviews with both male and female senior leaders to gain their perspectives on what works and what doesn't work. And I did this in 3 particular areas. So there's leadership development initiatives. Women really valued these, but they felt that even after they had done them, they may have gained some skills, but there was a perception that these programs can sometimes be seen as a bit of a sticking plaster. The senior managers that I interviewed were also saying, actually, there was quite a competitive process to get onto these programmes. And the senior managers were also saying, actually, you know, sometimes when you go through a competitive process and somebody has to present, and are you actually selecting the right people to go onto these programmes? Because some people, there may be women that are already quite confident and on the right track to get into leadership roles. The other thing that was quite interesting around this was that women were saying that, you know, women in particular wear imposter syndrome like a badge. And I don't know if anybody's seen this YouTube clip, and I won't go into a lot of detail, but I'm happy to talk about this over the coffee break. But it's relatable to something called bicycle face, which was kind of a made-up syndrome to stop women from actually using bicycles when they were first invented. And people are starting to liken imposter syndrome to that. So I think we tend to hear the word imposter syndrome. I've used it myself this morning. I feel like a bit of an imposter. But are we using it so often that we're actually reinforcing those feelings of not being confident? Networks were really useful. Again, they provided a safe space for women to actually share their concerns and their barriers, but have very little impact in making change, because quite often, unless they are put into place in the right way, how are they used to lobby senior management to make change in these areas? So there were several women that said, I found the network really, really great to start with, but it just got to a point where I just felt that we were talking about the same problems again and again. So how do you elevate those networks to the next level? By bringing in people that have the influence and power to change things. In terms of organisation commitments, so these were things like EDI policies, Athena Swan Charter, so things that the organisation actively does to change things. Were valued, but only if they were embedded properly. So talking to the person that was in charge of the institution, Athena Swan Charter, she said, we could legitimately list all of our objectives, say why we haven't met them, and reapply and still get bronze accreditation. And so she was very concerned that actually, was this just a tick box exercise? It has to be owned, it has to be embedded. And when talking to the senior managers, they all said the right thing. They all were very aware that leadership was not diverse enough. But there was this sense that shared responsibility means nobody's accountable. It's always somebody else's problem. It's the person that deals with Athena Swan, it's the equality officer in the university. But without being accountable as senior leaders, there was a huge piece missing there. And then finally, in terms of allyship, this for me was the most crucial element that came out. 95% of people that were surveyed said they needed to have more allyship. Talking to the senior managers, they all gave experiences of where they felt they had been allies. When I gave them the definition of allyship, which is about seeking out those from protected characteristic groups, from minoritised groups, to actively support and mentor them, they said, oh, well, I have been an ally because I've been a mentor or a coach, but has it been for somebody that is different to you? And also, I think there was something around allyship, around, there were more examples given by women being mentored, supported, coached by other women. But if you've got more men in a leadership team, there is something wrong there. So for me, having men in the room and having those conversations about how we enable a better understanding of what allyship is, a better understanding of the issues that women face, and actually getting men to be allies in a way that they are challenging systems and processes that have previously benefited them is the way to go. So there is something big here. We need to get better about looking out for each other and championing each other, otherwise only the most ruthless will succeed, which was one of the quotes that we had. So I know that I've probably I've probably got 1 minute left, but I want to kind of bring this back to the mosaic. And in terms of kind of holding these materials together is to really a real call for action, I guess. So to go back to your institutions to maybe start questioning all of the things that are trying to hold women's careers together and those pieces of the mosaic. Are they working? And question those processes. Do you know where your Athena Swan action plan is? Do you know what's in it? Can you see yourself in it? If not, why is it there in the first place? If I could take one thing away from this research, it would be around building capacity and allyship. A lot of what we talk about, the barriers, come down to changing behaviours. So it's really important that we keep chipping away at this problem. There's so much more to say, and I'm happy to have more conversations over coffee. But what I just wanted to finish with is, as you move throughout the day, to keep thinking about that mosaic. Each piece, however irrelevant it feels, creates something distinctive to your own unique career path and the barriers that you have faced. And difference is strength. So as PRISMs, the skills are endless. Strategist, organizer, resource manager, problem solver, communicator, collaborator, the list goes on. And I've heard this role often described as a bit of a linchpin. A mosaic can evolve, so think about your missing pieces and what you might want to add to your diverse picture. And think about your materials that you need to access. And I know we've got some exciting talks today around coaching and understanding further what the barriers are. So I think I'll probably leave it there because I'm out of time, but I hope that that's been useful.
Thank you so much, Marie. And I think we probably have time for only one question in the room and potentially one question online. So I don't know if anyone's got a question that they would like to ask Marie in the short amount of time we have. Any questions online? Yes. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. That was really great and really interesting. The slightly sobering thing that you said was that networks can become a place where we can all kind of moan about the same things and never change anything. So I wondered if you'd seen any examples in your research of networks that did manage to find the power to lobby, because obviously as a national network and for those of us with local networks in our institutions, we definitely don't want to end up doing that.
Yeah.
So if there's anything that came from the research, I'd be really interested to hear.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thank you. I don't think there are many examples, because it is having that balance between creating that safe space so people can be honest and authentic about the barriers that they face. But one of the recommendations that came out was to maybe think about, there are quite a lot of models around in terms of networks on how you can achieve that balance between creating that safe space, but then taking it to the next level to create change. So it might be that, whoever has influence in these areas, whether it's funders or is bringing them in, not inviting them in kind of exclusively, but bringing them in when you need them with a purpose. It is very difficult. And I think in a way, there's a question around the definition of networks, because they are there to create a safe space for people. But yeah, I think it's probably just thinking about how to bring people in when it's needed.
And if I can chip in, I would say maybe trying to have things like working groups, or I think the PRISM network already is organised as a committee into different areas that they can lead on.